Macmillan Audio presents The Silver Swan by John Banville. Read for you by Timothy Dalton.
Quirke did not recognize the name. It seemed familiar, but he could not put a face to it. Occasionally it happened that way. Someone would float up without warning out of his past, his drinking past. Someone he had forgotten, asking for a loan, or offering to let him in on a sure thing, or just wanting to make contact out of loneliness, or only to know that he was still alive and that the drink hadn't done for him. Mostly he put them off, mumbling about pressure of work and the like. This one should have been easy, since it was just a name and a telephone number left with the hospital receptionist, and he could have conveniently lost the piece of paper or simply thrown it away. Something caught his attention, however. He had an impression of urgency, of unease, which he couldn't account for and which troubled him. Billy Hunt. What was it the name sparked in him? Was it a lost memory or, more worryingly, a premonition? He put the scrap of paper on a corner of his desk and tried to ignore it. At the dead centre of summer the day was hot and muggy, and in the streets the barely breathable air was laden with a thin pall of mauve smoke, and he was glad of the cool and quiet of his windowless basement office in the pathology department. He hung his suit jacket on the back of his chair and pulled off his tie without undoing the knot and opened 2 buttons of his shirt and sat down at the cluttered metal desk. He liked the familiar smell here, the combination of old cigarette smoke, tea leaves, paper, formaldehyde, and something else, musky, fleshly, that was his particular contribution. He lit a cigarette and his eye drifted again to the paper with Billy Hunt's message on it. Just the name and the number that the operator had scribbled down in pencil, and the words, "Please call." The sense of urgent imploring was stronger than ever. Please call. For no reason he could think of, he found himself remembering the moment in McGonagall's pub half a year ago when, dizzily drunk amidst the din of Christmas revelling, he had caught sight of his own face, flushed and bulbous and bleary, reflected in the bottom of his empty whiskey glass, and had realized with unaccountable certitude that he had just taken his last drink. Since then he'd been sober. He was as amazed by this as was anyone who knew him. He felt that it was not he who had made the decision, but that somehow it had been made for him. Despite all his training and his years in the dissecting room, he had a secret conviction that the body has a consciousness of its own, and knows itself and its needs, as well as or better than the mind imagines it does. The decree delivered to him that night by his gut and his swollen liver and the ventricles of his heart was absolute and incontestable. For nearly 2 years he had been falling steadily into the abyss of drink, falling almost as far as he had in the time 2 decades before, after his wife had died, and now the fall was broken. Squinting at the scrap of paper on the corner of his desk, he lifted the telephone receiver and dialed. The bell jangled far down the line. Afterwards, out of curiosity, he had upended another whiskey glass, this time one he had not emptied, to find if it was really possible to see himself in the bottom of it, but no reflection had appeared there. The sound of Billy Hunt's voice was no help. He didn't recognize it any more readily than he had the name. The accent was at once flat and sing-song, with broad vowels and dulled consonants. A countryman. There was a slight flutter in the tone, a slight wobble, as if the speaker might be about to burst into laughter or into something else. Some words he slurred, hurrying over them. Maybe he was tipsy. "Yeah, you don't remember me," he said, "do you?" "Of course I do," Quirke lied. "Billy Hunt, you used to say it sounded like rhyming slang. We were in college together. I was in first year when you were in your last. I didn't really expect you to remember me. We went for different crowds. I was mad into the sports, hurling, football, all that, while you were with the arty lot with your nose stuck in a book or over at the Abbey or the Gate every night of the week. I dropped out of the medicine. Didn't have the stomach for it." Quirke let a beat of silence pass, then asked, "What are you doing now?" Billy Hunt gave a heavy, unsteady sigh. "Never mind that," he said, sounding more weary than impatient. "It's your job that's the point here." At last a face began to assemble itself in Quirke's labouring memory. Big broad forehead, definitively broken nose, a thatch of wiry red hair, freckles.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?